What's going on, everybody? Welcome to PFF's live NFL pregame show here for Week 6 in the NFL. So glad that you guys are here hanging out with us. Trevor Sikkema, Sam Monson, Ian Hartitz, Eric Eager here to get you ready for all of the big games here this week in the NFL. We also have Kendall Valenzuela, who is taking over the bar set yet again to make sure that she keeps us in check for all the stats that we might mess up on, and also your YouTube and Twitter comments. Kendall, what's going on?
Yes. Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good.
It should be fun. It's a good early slate. Like, I feel like we haven't had a good early slate for a little bit, so that'll be fun.
Do you include the Dolphins Jags in this? Because
Absolutely.
if you do, I might push back on it a little bit.
I don't know. I saw Eric just really entranced with the game this morning, so I feel like you have to include it.
Entranced, maybe. I was intently watching to a one-hop wide receivers.
When there's one game on, I mean, all eyes just have to be on it. Whether it's Thursday Night Football, early on and Sunday, whatever.
CFL, something,
well, you're a degenerate, so you're basically.
Fantasy points count the same in America and London, man. It's 2021.
This is very, very true. Well, we're joining you guys here in the beautiful Western and Southern studios. And, to start off this show, I actually want to move away from the London game. We're going to talk about that plenty. We're also going to get into a lot of your betting angles, a lot of your fantasy football angles. We got you covered throughout the next hour on this show. But I want to talk big picture a little bit to start things here. I want to talk about, let's start with the AFC. And if the season ended today, I want to talk about who would be in the playoffs. For the AFC, number one seed if the playoffs started today, the Los Angeles Chargers. Then it's the Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Tennessee Titans. That's the way that things are shaping up right now, guys. When you look at this slate right here, 1 through 7 for the AFC, what do you think about the names and how they are in the order here?
I think there's a big game this week, right? With the Chargers going to the Ravens, 2.5-point underdogs. This is going to decide a lot. They both have victories over Kansas City, but the Chargers have to play the Chiefs again, one of the dangerous teams there. So this is a big game. I think if the Ravens win, you're talking about a team that has a stranglehold, possibly on not the 1 seed. I think Buffalo has, the lead, 40% or so, a really easy schedule, probably one of the easiest in the NFL. But control over that 2 seed, control over, that second spot, and if the Bills were to falter, the possible home field advantage in the AFC.
Raiders and the Broncos were undefeated early on, and now they're kind of struggling a little bit as of late. I mean, what do we think about that, Sam?
Yeah, wobbling for slightly different reasons, I think. But ultimately, both those teams were probably never likely to be amongst the very best contenders for the overall season. The most interesting thing about this list to me is the 2 names that aren't on it. There's no Kansas City Chiefs and no Cleveland Browns. Those are arguably the number 1, number 2 seed in terms of people's expectations going into the season. And neither one of those teams has been the dominant force we expected them to be.
Well, let's not bury the lead, guys. This is the first time in 3 years the Chiefs aren't the consensus, clear-cut favorite. How about the Bills? Number 1 scoring O, number 1 scoring D. I know, Eric, maybe they won't be the best defense for the rest of the year. We could see that come back to earth. But either way, they have clearly come a long way on both sides of the ball. And, to see Josh Allen, who was shaky during the first 4 weeks of the year, really have, if not his best, at least his second best game in the biggest one of the year, you love to see it.
Yeah, I think we're going to first see the real big effects of taking away that one bye, right? Because there is a chance that there's going to be, a fairly, because right now what we're not seeing in the playoff race right now, Chiefs, but also the Browns. And the Browns, I think, are one of the better teams in the AFC. So when you look at and say, okay, what does that 2 seed even mean? Well, it's a lot less. And to be that 1 seed matters a lot more because in the sense of, you might get that 2 seed knocked out in the first round of the playoffs by a team like Kansas City, by a team like Cleveland. And then you have an additional thing, which is the 4 seed, which is probably going to be who wins the AFC South. And chances are the team that wins that division is not going to be very good. So this is kind of like going to be a really fun AFC to monitor because of how there are some good teams right now that might be in the lower seeds, and there's going to be a really bad team in that 4th
And
seed.
that's a good way to segue into our projections, okay? So we took a look at if the season ended today, here's who would be in. But for PFF's projections here, we're swapping out the Bengals and the Broncos, and we're putting the Chiefs and the Browns in there. When you look at percentages to make the playoffs, Buffalo, man, 97%, like you were talking about. That is a stranglehold right there. You mentioned the Titans. They've got an 80% chance. You figure that's really because of the division. But Chargers at 78, Chiefs 62. And so that's kind of the way that things are shaping out right now. So we're taking the Broncos and the Bengals out. We assume that the way things are going to play out here, the Chiefs and the Browns are going to win a handful more games throughout the season. They're going to be the ones to get it. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think we got to get the big names in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think both those teams are still too talented to get in there. It does show like how much faith we have in the good parts of Kansas City, though, that they are still a 62% chance to make the playoffs. Despite where they are and how they've been losing so far this season, like there's still too much good on that roster to be this bad in terms of record over the course of the season. And they are making moves in terms of, sitting Daniel Sorensen down and things like that.
That's the thing. Like everybody's like, oh, sitting Daniel Sorensen down doesn't solve any of their problems. But I think what it does is getting some of these bad players off the field for the Chiefs makes some of their problems solvable. That's the point. I think when you look at a team like Kansas City, you ask the question, can they solve some of their issues? And it's like, yeah, all their problems are solvable, right? Like, play a better scheme on defense. Put some of your better players out there. They've spent a second-round pick on the aforementioned Juan Thorno. They spent a second-round pick on Willie Gay. He hasn't played much this year. Like, they do have talent that they could put on the field. And obviously Patrick Mahomes, if they stop turning the ball over, he has as many interceptions this year as he had all of last year, then I think things are solvable there. Does that mean they'll win division? No. We have them 27% to win the division. This is the Chargers division right now to win, and the Raiders kind of coming up from behind with a new head coach. But it puts them in a firm position for the playoffs.
I still think we're going to have the big boys, the big names make the playoffs. It just might not stack up the way we thought. Right. We might get some really good opening weekend matchups that we thought could be potential AFC Championship games.
Well, I'm going to be pissed if the fraudulent Titans are the reason why we don't get one of these big boys in the playoffs, because you look at the top 5, Buffalo, Tennessee, Baltimore, Cleveland, LA. It's like one of those which one doesn't belong type of questions. With that said, they got Buffalo here on Monday night, and next week they got the Chiefs. So Tannehill, still PFF, 6th highest graded passer, even without his big 2 wide receivers for most of the year. I think we'll find a lot out about the
They
Titans
match up
next
really
2
well
weeks.
with these 2 teams too, right? Both Buffalo and Kansas City struggle against the run. Derrick Henry, at some point the wheels will fall off if you continue to give him pace for 500 touches a year. Like, at some point something's got to happen. But right now he's still a form of the best back in football, and teams like Kansas City, like Buffalo, are kind of soft against the run.
Look, as we saw with the NFC East last year, somebody has to get in from a bad division. That's just the way that it is. So if it's the Titans getting there, it's the Titans. But that's a good way to segue into what it looks like for the NFC here. If the playoffs ended today, Cardinals, lone undefeated team left in the NFL. They'd be the 1 seed, of course. We got the Buccaneers right after them. Cowboys, Packers, Rams, Bears, Panthers. How about that? Please, somebody convince me that the Panthers and the Bears are going to be on this list when the season's over. Sam, can you do it?
No, certainly not the Bears. I mean, look, Carolina thinks they're a playoff team. That's why they're making moves like bringing in Stephon Gilmore, knowing that he'll be a few weeks away. They bring in C.J. Henderson. They're trying to patch up the loss that they had of J.C. Horn getting injured. So they at least think they're capable of making the playoffs, given the season that's started and where they are on this journey. I don't know if that's true. I think ultimately there's some other good teams that might have to jump them as the season goes on. And look, the Minnesota Vikings today are the kind of dangerous team that they could easily lose to, and the whole thing goes out the window. Chicago would need some kind of minor miracle to make the playoffs.
But do they though? Because like this is my take though. Like, the NFC. It was flat going into the year, and now is extreme. Like, the NFC North, every single team in the NFC North has a top 10 most difficult schedule per PFF ELO, meaning, like, how many of those teams are going to make the play? And how many of those teams are going to run away with it other than maybe Green Bay, right? Because the way I see it, you could see the Bears, and the Bears are 9 games over 500 with Matt Nagy. I made a joke on the last week that he's the worst head coach of all time to be 9 games over 500 this far into his career. But like the proof is in the pudding. The defense has played well after a Sunday night game on week 1 where they made a bunch of errors. They're still a talented defense, and Justin Fields sort of grows into it. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that I think is dangerous here. But like whenever you want to make a case that a team can't make the playoffs in the NFC, I point you to who's going to take that? Is it going to be Seattle with Gino Smith? Is it going to be San Fran with Trey Lance?
Right.
Like, there aren't that many teams where you're like, oh, like in the AFC where it's the Browns and the Chiefs, you're like, oh, if these teams falter, there's a clearly good team that will take their spot. Those teams don't exist in the NFC.
So the only team for us, when we look at current playoff projections and if the season ended today, the only team that we would swap in there, given percentages, would be the Saints. It would be the Saints are in and the Panthers are out. The Bears are still in, but the Saints are ahead of them at number 6. They've got that 48% and the Bears have that 34%. So, I mean, it feels like the Saints are really that only team. Ian, do you think the Bears have this chance to make the playoffs? Even if it might be a sputtering chance to make the playoffs?
Not especially. I guess the thing that sticks out to me with this top 7 we had up there is the top 2 contenders, the Cardinals, Buccaneers. They've earned it, but they've also been cut here, people. Kyler Murray, shoulder injury, really actually did see a slight drop-off in his completion rate last week, and we saw this big time last year, not just with his completion rate, but his willingness to run. I don't know, not having Cliff Kingsbury, maybe that actually ends up being a positive. We'll see what happens there. But then the Buccaneers, like, it was almost comical trying to find a hole in this roster before the season started. But if you really wanted to be a dick about it, you could say their lack of depth at cornerback. They tried to get Richard Sherman. Now he's banged up. Okay, you don't get to play Jalen Hurts every week, guys. Like, at some point, Tampa needs to slow down a passing attack that actually can throw the ball. And I think it's at least in a little bit more question now than it was at the beginning of the year.
I think what's really interesting about that list, if you look at it, is the Bears are 7th, but their percentage is 34%. So that means like there's a bunch of teams beneath them at like 30%, 29%.
Right.
And like even as late as, I believe it was like, week 17, we were doing that stuff with Steve Kornacki. It was like in week 15, it was like the Bears had like a 27% chance to make the playoffs, like at that point, right? So like one team that makes the playoffs in the NFC is going to be one of these random teams that we weren't even considering. Like the Bears last year lost.
Washington, my dream's still alive.
Yeah, I mean, like, we make fun. We make Washington as the 4th hardest schedule in the NFL moving forward, so that's going to be harder. But we make fun. But it is going to be a team. Like last year, the Bears lost 6 consecutive games in the middle of the year, and they still made the playoffs. Like 7 playoff teams is a lot of grace, and so there's going to be a team here. Sam's Minnesota Vikings could be one of them. Like like one of these teams with a great quarterback, a good quarterback, good enough, will probably emerge here and pick off one of these teams. The Saints are a good one where they have a quarterback playing well, a great head coach, and a good defense. Like that, to me, I think that's a decent formula to rise up and be at least a competent NFC playoff team.
All right, Kendall, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so we know some names that are out this week, and we're going to keep you guys updated as much as we can with the big questions for the inactives today. But Christian McCaffrey, you guys heard, going on IR. Xavier Howard, Devontae Parker, Saquon Barkley, to name a few. Juju Smith-Schuster, Russell Wilson, and Chris Carson, just to name a few. But that takes us into our start or sit questions for you guys. And we are going to start with start or sit Sam Darnold versus Kirk Cousins.
Ooh. Okay, I'm starting with Ian. I have to start all of these with Ian because he's the master at it.
So Captain Kirk has been pretty good in this early stretch, but so has Darnold, particularly in Fantasyland, which is what we care about, at least for this segment. Until last week, Darnold was number 1 in the NFL in rushing touchdowns, which is ridiculous, but hey, the few things he did do good with the Jets usually did involve his legs. So he gives us that rushing floor that Cousins just really doesn't. And the Vikings, well, Daniil Hunter has helped get that pass rush back under control. Bashaud Breeland and Patrick Peterson, arguably the league's 2 worst outside cornerbacks just in terms of production given up. So I will be taking Darnold over your favorite quarterback, Kirk Cousins, this week.
Look, this game, this Carolina versus Minnesota game, total on the game 45.5. It's going to really test the coverage versus pass rush theory because when you look at Carolina, Hassan Reddick has like 8 sacks so far this year or something crazy like that. Brian Burns is fantastic. Derek Brown's great. On the other side, Everson Griffin has been productive for Minnesota. Danielle Hunter's been awesome. Both secondaries stink out loud, right? So then the question, and receivers in this game, DJ Moore's fantastic.
Yep.
Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen.
Yep.
Like, you have weapons on the outside. So these quarterbacks can get a millisecond to throw. I think we're going to see some fireworks in this one. If they can't, it's going to be like a 17-19 slog like Minnesota's game last week was.
When we say that Sam Darnold has been really good, particularly in fantasy, we mean exclusively in fantasy, right? Because if you look at where Darnold's grade is right now,
come on, they're winning.
It's come back down to exactly
They're
where
in
it's
the
always
playoffs
been.
right now, Sam.
Sam Darnold is the same guy he's always been his entire career, which is to say a below average, maybe not even viable NFL starting quarterback. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, I think right now has the second highest PFF passing grade. Now look, we know it's warped a little bit, and he skews his stats in a direction that favor him, and he's very good at protecting his numbers.
The guy's the finesse king, and
Yes.
he's a finesse Hall of Famer.
But
He
if
is.
we're talking, here's a team versus a team, let's go with the better quarterback. It's clearly Cousins.
Yeah, I think the issue, what we're going to see in this game is possibly you have two great running backs, right? And one of them is out in McCaffrey. And I think, weirdly, that kind of opens up what Carolina's going to do in some ways. Like, it makes them throw the ball on early downs. Early down throwing is easier for bad quarterbacks, right? So you want to put a guy like Sam Darnold in that position. Dalvin Cook's playing in this game. And, that offensive line is not very good. The defensive line for the Panthers. You might get more long yardage plays for Cousins. And I think it skews it a little bit to the point where Darnold might be the better play, not because he's the better quarterback. I don't think we dispute that, but because of the way that this game matches up with the running back and what the Vikings' approach to the game might be, unfortunately.
I feel like this is a matchup of two toss-up teams, right?
Yeah.
Every week I go into things and be like, oh, who's Carolina playing? And be like, ooh, they could play him tight, or maybe not. And I go into every Vikings game and I go, ooh, they could play him tight, or maybe not. And now they're going up against each other. You went Kirk, right?
Yeah.
You went Kirk. You went Sam?
Yeah.
All right, I'll go Sam. I'll go even here. I'll do that. I'm honestly just disappointed that, Ian, you can't tweet out the Office Creed gif anymore for Christian McCaffrey, where he's just like, 1 week, because now he's on IR and
I
you
gotta get him
can't.
to say 3 weeks.
You got to do something like that.
All
Kenna,
right,
what's
the next one is, so Chuba Hubbard, he is the guy to watch, obviously, with Christian McCaffrey going on IR, but can he carry a fantasy team to victory? Start or sit, Chuba Hubbard versus Josh Jacobs.
So I do think we are sticking with the Panthers here and going with Chuba. Interestingly, what happened with Chuba was the first week McCaffrey was out, we actually had him get a lot of touches but lose out on all the important pass down work to something named Rodney Smith, who is now no longer a member of the Carolina Panthers. So Chuba actually does have the CMC every down role this week, which he didn't have over the past two. So from a pure volume standpoint, we got to take him over Jacobs. With that said, I still maintain Jacobs is one of the better buy low running backs out there. Hasn't been finding his way to the end zone much, neither has the rest of the Raiders offense. But he has 10 combined targets over the past 2 weeks, highest he's ever had in a 2-week stretch before. So he survived Kenyon Drake, he survived Jalen Richard. We got to see what the post-Gruden version of this offense looks like.
Survived Kenyon Drake.
And we still got to make sure Peyton Barber isn't an issue. So weird checklist, I know, but we're almost there.
That's awesome. The Raiders' offense can only get better, in my opinion, right? When we look at play action, they run play action half as much as the 31st best team at running play action this year. So as much as I've liked Gruden in the past, and I think he does do somewhat of a decent job of getting more out of his players, this year he had fallen off significantly. So does that impact Josh Jacobs? Does that give him more carries at the 1 yard line? He has looked like not great this year, but maybe he gets some opportunities that he wasn't otherwise getting. But it's a good question. I like Denver's a tough defense, though.
Yeah.
Sam, what do we think?
The Raiders' backfield owns my favorite statistic of this NFL season.
Oh,
which is
here
that
we go.
Peyton Barber has more yards after contact than he has yards. He is gaining all of his yards by himself, all of them.
As someone who watched a lot of Peyton Barber when he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that is, to a T, a Peyton Barber stat, no question about it. That's great. Okay, so are you...
That's all I got.
But are you going with Josh Jacobs or are you going with Chuba Hubbard?
I mean, I would go with Chuba Hubbard because of the volume and because of the fact that Raiders offensive line is horrendous.
And the Vikings give up run. Like last week we make fun of Detroit, but they could run the ball on the Vikings, and it's not like Quintez Cephas was moving safeties around. So I feel like that,
All due respect to Quintez Cephas.
Yeah, all due respect.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
He's the fastest 4.75 I've ever seen. But the Vikings defense is kind of gooey against the run.
Gooey.
Weird. I'm going to use it
There it
again.
is. There's the gooey. I'm going Josh Jacobs.
All right.
Kendall, what's the next one?
All right, gooey. That's good. No, Kadarius Toney. He is in line to play an exploitable matchup kind of today with the Rams. He's really been a bright spot with Saquon Barkley out. So the question is, starter sit Khalil Herbert versus Michael Pittman or Kadarius Toney.
Okay, a little twofer right here, Ian. What do you think?
I think Toney and Pittman are both kind of in that same upside wide receiver 3 tier, so they're perfectly fine starting options in most lineups. But give me the running back that is looking at 15 to 20 touches and probably not leaving the field, and that is Khalil Herbert. Someone that was popular on your waiver wires because they got to play with so much positive game script last week, and he split everything with Damian Williams, who is now on the COVID list. So fantasy, at the end of the day, is something where we should chase volume over talent. So, hat tip to Toney. We do have Sterling Shepard coming back. We do have Toney, who was questionable with an ankle injury. Michael Pittman. We got to see if T.Y. Hilton is going to be active for this one. Either way, it's kind of been a situation all year where we don't know which guy Wentz is going to be targeting next. So again, give me that guaranteed volume with Khalil Herbert.
Ian, what is Green Bay's run defense?
Very bad.
Gooey.
Yeah.
Gooey. There it is.
Go with Herbert.
Okay, he's going with Herbert.
Always go with the running back against the goo.
I can't believe I missed that. I'm just embarrassed.
It's okay. They were the original gooey run defense.
I'm going Herbert too. I just think it makes too much sense. He's going to get the volume. I really like this tape out of Virginia Tech. I mean, I was looking for him to get into more of a. I didn't think he'd be a starting role right away, but just a more contributing role, and here he is. He's getting a full workload. So give me Khalil Herbert. I have to stay true to the scouting report.
All right, just another quick one. Marquise Brown, Tyler Lockett, starter sit.
Yeah, I'm going with the artist known as Hollywood because he's from Florida. But you know what? He's been playing like he could just have that nickname as well for really not just this year, but going into last year. Marquise Brown, at least 80 yards and or a touchdown in 12 of his last 13 games. And we all know the one game he didn't could have had 2 touchdowns, but unfortunately caught a case of the Deontay Johnson's that day. So couldn't get it done there. And Tyler Lockett, we already know he's boomer bust enough as it is. Now you take Russell Wilson out of that equation. I'm worried at how far 5 to 6 targets will go for Lockett and DK Metcalf alike when it's Gino Smith, who, hey, he had a great Thursday night game instead of Russ moving forward.
Yeah, I think that Seahawks will have the Pittsburgh Steelers have a good defense, right? Like they're not as good as they have been in the past, but like trying to buy into a backup quarterback against a decent defense on the road on Sunday Night Football, like I don't know, just give me and the Ravens passing offense has actually been a lot better than people believe, right? So give me the volume.
And they're throwing more too.
No Sammy Watkins. I know Bateman comes back, but like Hollywood Brown has that like role on that offense that's pretty consistent, and Lamar has been good, and Lamar's going to be in a gunslinging game. Like the opposition matters here too. Like Pittsburgh's going to want this game to be 17-13. The Chargers are fine playing this game 42-47. So give me Brown.
Kendall, what's the last one? I know you got one more for us.
So the last one is Ricky Seals-Jones versus Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry has been finding the end zone lately. Jonnu Smith ran 6 pass routes last week. I don't know, you're paying him $50 million. I'm not Bill Belichick, but seems a little curious to me. Ricky Seals-Jones, on the other hand, did not leave the field for more than, I think, 2 total snaps. Like, it's crazy to me that Washington, who refuses to give Antonio Gibson this 3-down role that we want, they give these, like, converted tight ends every single snap without even thinking twice about it. So Logan Thomas, the former collegiate QB, as we all know, Ricky Seals-Jones is actually a wide receiver convert. So RSJ has seamlessly taken over for Logan Thomas as the every down tight end. And again, he's not just this, dad bod plotter, Jason Witten going to get you 2 yards when you catch the ball 1 yard downfield. He can actually make some big plays happen. So RSJ as the number 2 pass game option really in this offense with Curtis Samuel still sidelined in anyone's idea of a shootout between Washington and Kansas City.
No select the dad bods though. Just so.
Yeah, there was so much in that. You gave him an acronym, RSJ. He's already earned an acronym in the fantasy community. Good for him. Dad bods took a little bit of a stray there, man. I will go with the former Chief legend Ricky Seals-Jones here.
Yeah, against the Chiefs. I always go with the guy that's playing the Chiefs defense.
Tight ends against Kansas City. They made Zach Ertz look like Ozzie Newsome the other week.
No Sorensen, though, so it's going to be hard.
Yeah, maybe.
It's going to be a little bit more difficult.
It's not Soren season anymore.
Before we move on from fantasy and really get into a lot of these game previews, Ian, I know you have some flex rankings this week that you want to touch on. I know there's been some moving up and down with where you have these guys ranked, so give it to us.
Yeah, just a couple notes here. Darrell Henderson is someone who you see him coming in at 18 on the flex, but he's right behind Joe Mixon ahead of Jonathan Taylor, firmly in that RB1 tier at this point. He has that true every down role that a lot of people were hoping Cam Akers would have. Obviously suffered the preseason Achilles, but he has held off Sony Michel and should be in lineups of all shapes and sizes. And then Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, these guys pulling up the rear a little bit. I know for CeeDee and even Keenan to an extent, they've been a bit overshadowed by some of their teammates balling out. We got to stick with the talent, though, at some point. And believe me, people, with a banged-up Mike Williams, wouldn't be surprised to see Keenan Allen start flirting with those 10, 12, dare I say, 15 target totals that we have seen over the years.
Look at that. All right, well, before we get into these previews, got to talk to you guys about our friends at Western Southern. We're getting your fantasy lineups ready. We're getting all your bets ready. But when it comes to your financial goals, Western and Southern has you ready. Whether it's retirement, life insurance, investment solutions, whatever it is, if you're starting a family, if you're buying a house, or you just want to see your money grow more, whatever your financial goal is, Western and Southern can help you get there. Team up with them today by going over to westernsouthern.com/PFF. Guarantee you will be glad that you did. Kansas City Chiefs. We don't talk about them often, right? I mean, this is a great treat. We get to actually talk about the Chiefs. We talk about the Chiefs every week, but here I actually think that this is an interesting matchup for both teams. They're taking on the Washington football team in Washington. Chiefs is a road team favored by 6.5, and I think this has got some interesting storylines on both sides for where both of these teams have started this year and where they could be going. So, Sam, I'm going to start with you. I think the big talking point is with the Chiefs' defense.
Yeah.
It's bad, but how bad is it, considering what they have on the other side on offense?
And that really is the question. I think we're going to get some way towards answering that this week. We could spend like the next 25 minutes just looking at the statistics that the Chiefs rank dead last in defense.
Eric would rather we not.
Horrendous. Eric would love that. That's like his idea of the show.
I think it's therapeutic. I think it's cathartic.
Is it? Okay, all right.
Like if they were playing great games and losing, that would suck, right? But
let me give you a couple, just a teaser, and then we can get into the actual discussion. They are more than 2 times as bad as 29 other defenses in EPA per play allowed on defense. So horrific. They are last in successful play rate. They're last in touchdown drive allowing rate. They're allowing a scoring drive on 54% of the opposing drives. They are ridiculously bad as a defense. On the other hand, they have faced some pretty good offenses. So to what extent is this being skewed by the fact that they played some really good teams who have been able to put up points with them and they haven't been able to stop them? Like if they still allow the same thing to happen to Washington, forget it. Like right off this season, they're not winning a championship. I don't care how Patrick Mahomes plays. If he stops turning the ball over, it won't matter. They can't stop anybody. But if they get just a little bit better, and if they show that, look, hey, Daniel Sorensen was a big part of the problem here, and he's not on the field, and then
the hot dog suit meme is part of that, right? Like whose issue is this? Well, it's us for playing him.
And then in the future, we move Chris Jones back inside, where he's like a top 3 player at his position, as opposed to toiling away on the edge. They can get a little bit better. So I'm getting back on the Chiefs' horse. I think they will show their best.
I disagree with that just slightly, right? Like because the fact of the matter is they've turned the ball over against the Ravens. They turned the ball over against the Chargers. Their defense was awful in both those games. They still win those games without the turnovers, don't they? I do think that we are, and it is weird because like the one canary in the coal mine is when they got to play a bad offense in Philly. Philly dragged them up and down the field too, right? So and the question then becomes like, how much does that one game weigh in? Because against great teams, they've struggled too. This is a game that I do think will mean a lot because Taylor Heineke's not that good. He's spunky though, and he's capable. This isn't like Jacoby Brissett, right? Like where you're just like, look, if you play a bad game, Jacoby's not going to be able to take advantage of it. Like Taylor Heineke will take advantage of a bad defense if it's presented to him. So this is a big test for them on defense.
And I think that the bigger picture with this is, if you ask basically any NFL fan right now, do you think the Chiefs are making the playoffs? They would tell you yes. So when it comes to, okay, they've struggled against a lot of teams so far this year, but it's been against good quarterbacks where you say that's kind of like hey, they've been good quarterbacks. The Chiefs' entire season, as difficult as this may be, is Super Bowl or bust, or at least an appearance.
That's how they've set their roster up.
And to get there, You got to beat good QBs. So, like, even if they improved against bad QBs enough to get a record to get in the playoffs, does that really matter for the Chiefs?
And that's why, look, I don't think that the defense is necessarily what's costing them each one of these individual games, but the defense playing as bad as it is right now removes all margin for error.
It puts pressure on the offense that is unfair,
right.
I think.
The offense can no longer make a mistake, right? And in the past, they've been able to do that. They can turn the ball over every now and again, even though they haven't. Like, they've been riding the right side of that variance. But they could make mistakes, and it didn't matter because the defense would bail them out once. They'd catch a drive somewhere, and they'd get away with it. Now you don't have that. If you screw up on offense, you're done because the defense is allowing a scoring drive half the time, more than half the time.
Right.
So it just removes any margin for error, any opportunity to screw up on offense. They don't have it anymore.
I know Kendall's got a question about this.
Yeah, so then what will the AFC West and just overall playoff picture look like if the Chiefs get their 4th loss today?
Well, you said it's the Chargers division at this point, right?
I mean, the Chargers have, a 2-game lead over the Chiefs, plus the tiebreaker of not only having beaten them, but beaten them in Kansas City. So, like, that's a huge that's a huge boost there. The Raiders and the Broncos have a game lead. I'm not that concerned, although the Chiefs have never matched up well with the Raiders with Darren Waller. So that's something to think about. It's just going to be a huge slog. Like, I think if the Chargers were to go into Baltimore today and win, and then the Chiefs were to lose this game, I think you put the Chargers at like a 70% chance to win that division. And that to me, if you think that's going to happen, if you go to the betting markets right now, the Chargers are like minus 105 to win this division. That's a great bet. If you think maybe the Chargers slip up today, they've been dealing with the good end of variance with 4th downs and turnovers and stuff, and the Chiefs will take care of business today. Maybe the Chiefs, it's something I can't remember exactly what the number is, like plus 150 or so to win that division might be the bet you want.
I know that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on injured reserve, so, what do we think about the run game in Kansas
Sound
City?
the panic alarms now. This is the real problem, right? I mean, look, in Fantasyland, it sucks that you lost Clyde, but you can go ahead and just scoop up Darrell Williams, or someone already did, and treat him as pretty much the same thing that Clyde was, which was a low-end RB2. It's funny, like, Clyde was catching, a lot of crap from people about his performance, and no, he's not Brian Westbrook, Jamal Charles, LaShawn McCoy, any of these great Andy Reid running backs that he's had in the past. But those great running backs didn't have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce to throw the ball to. So we have expected points at a PFF that just show you, based on their workload, how many points should this guy have been scoring. Clyde was only the RB30 in that before he got hurt. So, guys, I think when we look back at this Chiefs team more than anything here, I think we're going to realize they played the Browns, the Ravens, the Chargers, and the Bills in 4 of their first 5 games, and we'll laugh at the idea that they're anything other than a contender.
Yeah, they got beat up a little bit, but they were losing a bunch of 1-score games, and then the Buffalo game, right? Like, I think the Buffalo game was really the one that kind of elicited all the doubt about the Chiefs, because it was a multiple score loss. It's the first time the Chiefs in the regular season with Patrick Mahomes starting had lost by multiple scores. And they did it at home, and they did it against the Bills, and the Bills beat them up. And it looked bad on offense, it looked bad on defense. I think we take and we'll talk about this with the Bills too. We take a step back and say that's one game, right? Packers lost by 4 or 5 touchdowns to New Orleans. There's just one game. Like, these things happen. The Bills lost to Pittsburgh at home. Like, these things happen. The question is like, how much do we believe that's true? Because I do think the fundamentals for this Chiefs team, it could go either way.
There is an argument that this has been coming for a while, though. Like, if you look at the last couple of years in terms of just turnover luck, Mahomes has had a lot of turnover-worthy plays over the last couple of years, and very few of them have ended up being intercepted. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden, we're seeing the other end of that roller coaster, and like that is variance. Right?
This offense, to Ian's point, this offense needs a James White. Like, they have Clyde. They drafted to be a pass catcher, to be a dynamic guy. If you bet his under prop for catches in every game, you have a private island at this point. And like, I think the problem is they don't have a guy when the play breaks down. Like, Brady had James White, 12 catches in the Super Bowl.
Right.
Shane Vereen had like 11 catches in that Malcolm Butler game.
It's important.
The Chiefs just don't have that guy, and so Mahomes has to take off for those 4 or 5 yards and take hits, or he has to just throw the ball in the dirt. And I think that is where this offense sputters. Do they get it from Darrell Williams? Do they get it from Jerick McKinnon? I don't think so. And so maybe that's the leak on that offense.
Well, and they can't solve the number 2 receiver hole either. They paid Sammy Watkins all that money. They drafted Mecole Hardman in the 2nd round. Now we got Flash Gordon out there looking like he's, what was the booger thing? A biscuit away from playing tight end or whatever.
Lord.
Benjamin.
Lord,
so, yeah, man, they got to find some other consistent third option, because the Bills, as they've shown, they can at least contain Kelce and Tyreek enough for their own offense to put up all sorts of points.
Next matchup we're talking about is the Arizona Cardinals and the Cleveland Browns. Big matchup because it's the lone undefeated team left in the NFL. I'll take going to Cleveland. Cleveland a favorite in this one. I believe it's 2.5 is the line. Did
it's
it move?
3.5 now.
So it moved to 3.5.
Yeah.
Ian, I'm going to start with you here because no Nick Chubb in this one. We know that Cleveland wants to run the football. That is their game script. Is Kareem Hunt enough for you to confidently take the Browns in this matchup?
Not really, but I will say I felt a lot better about the Cardinals before it seemed like, Cliff was out, and then we start losing other starters, Rodney Hudson, Chandler Jones. A lot more issues than I think we could have been feeling confident about before. But with Kareem Hunt here in Cleveland, we know that we have a top 5 fantasy back, people. I know that we had the, Ian Rappaport report, and he's just doing his job where they're saying, hey, we don't want to kill the guy with touches. No, he's not going to play 100% of the snaps. Pretty much nobody does other than Christian McCaffrey, and then maybe we're starting to realize that's not such a great idea, trying to keep your guy healthy. But I guess I'm interested in what happens behind Kareem Hunt, because at some point, man, these deep balls to Odell Beckham, they got to work, because I know you put up.
You hope they work.
I know you put up 42 points without getting the ball to this guy, but I maintain, guys, the best version of this Browns offense needs to have a field stretch.
There is not a person on the planet whose name isn't Beckham Jr. who wants this man to succeed more than Ian. More than Ian.
But Ian's also you're also an OG AAF guy. And I know that the squares will go to Hunt in DFS, but the sharps will go to Dearness Johnson.
I hope. We got Dimitri Felton there.
Dimitri Felton too. I think what this shows is how good the Browns have been at getting talent in the building, right? Because you've seen the failure of Beckham. And I'm more saying it's like a global failure. I'm not focusing on the individual.
As a planet.
Exactly. You have Jarvis Landry's injury, but now you have Hooper, you have Nick Njoku with big plays last week. You obviously have Dearness Johnson, you have Dimitri Felton, you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, you have Charting. It's there's a bunch of players on this team that can make plays. And my only concern here, from a fantasy perspective with this game, is the weather. You look at the weather today, it's not going to be particularly great. You're going to have more than 20-mile-per-hour winds. It's why you've seen this total go from the 50s to 48.5, and now you're seeing it. I bet it this morning at 48. I'll still take it at 48, just because the weather in this game, I think, is going to elicit a slower game. And Ian talked about the shoulder injury for Kyler Murray. Last year, pre-shoulder injury, top 5 offense in EPA. After it, bottom 5. Right? So this offense changes when he doesn't have that absolute cannon and that running ability. No Cliff today, might be a positive, might be a negative, who knows. But I think under is really the only way you can go now that Cleveland's getting more than a full field goal.
So I want to transition into Arizona's offense. I didn't mean to cut you off, Sam. If you have a great point, you could just throw it immediately back. But I did want to get into Arizona's offense because you mentioned Cliff not being there. I'm going to get into more of that in a second. But DeAndre Hopkins is really a topic that I want to focus on, because this dude's sometimes had double-digit games in a season where he's had 10 or more targets. Doesn't have a single game so far this year where he's received 10 or more targets. It's just a different look DeAndre Hopkins. And I think we're supposed to think that's a good thing, right? Because the rest of this Cardinals offense is playing really, really well. But would you still want to see Arizona, I don't want to say force feed always sounds like a negative, but just go to DeAndre Hopkins a little bit more? What do you think, Ian?
Yeah,
because he's a fantasy guy.
Well, actually, I mean,
of course,
yeah,
Ian wants to see him get 20 targets in a game.
AJ Green is not maybe as dusty as a lot of us thought he was, but when it's still between him or DeAndre Hopkins, yes, I want Hopkins to get those. Look what happened last week when they finally had a sense of urgency. One deep ball down the sideline and then an end zone fade, and all of a sudden their offensive rut was gone, thanks to DeAndre Hopkins, who remains one of the best receivers in the game. But yeah, as we've been talking about fantasy, guys, it's all about targets. And the good news is that Hopkins is starting to pull away over the last 4 weeks in team target share. Now, I'll be interested to see what this offense looks like post Max Williams. Now, I think our question got answered when they traded for Zach Ertz.
Immediately.
Yeah. As much as we always talk about the Cardinals being this 4-wide heavy offense, they still only run it in the 20-25% zone. That's just a reality in today's NFL. So I was really hoping that without Max Williams, we were going to see Rondale Moore get that full-time role and just be a full-time starter in this offense. For now, it's still going to be Hopkins, probably Kirk, AJ Green, and Zach Ertz once he's healthy enough to be there. So long story short, no, I'm not worried about Hopkins. The Cardinals are killing it. Their offense is doing great. No real life concerns, but yeah, throw him the ball, please. I got him too many squads for this.
Well, today things might look a little bit different, right? Because you mentioned it, Cliff Kingsbury tests positive for COVID-19, so he's not going to be at the game.
As does the offensive coordinator. So the guy calling the plays is now the assistant wide receiver, or is it the assistant wide receivers coach? Is that what I said? So look, we can debate whether Cliff Kingsbury has really maximized this offense and whether he's done everything possible to take them steps forward. But going from the guy whose offense it is to the assistant wide receivers coach calling the plays, that has to be a negative impact.
Assistant to the assistant wide receiver.
I know Kendall's got something from the people.
Yeah, the question is, so if the Arizona Cardinals take their first loss today, does it lie solely because Cliff Kingsbury's not there, or because the Browns have found a way to make them look mortal?
No, the Browns were favored to win this game.
Yeah, it's not solely because of that. I think this is a matchup that favors Cleveland anyway. I was a bit more on board with it when Nick Chubb was going to be there as well. With him out, it's a little bit more sketchy, but no defense in the NFL has given up more explosive runs than the Cardinals defense. The Browns just put up 230 against the Chargers, 7 yards per attempt. Like, this was a game that skewed towards the Browns being able to just run all over them anyway. And also, like, Kyler Murray has been playing way better than Baker Mayfield this year, but it's been riding like a huge amount of sort of unsustainable stuff. Like, he has a better grade under pressure right now than he does when kept clean. Quarterbacks don't do that. That always comes
whereas
back down to
Mayfield,
earth.
for the second straight year, has a passer rating like around 30 when pressured in the first half of the season. And he seemed to get better at that last year. A lot of it's statistical gravity. You can't be that bad all year at that thing. But again, like, there is some meat left on the bone for Cleveland, Odell being the biggest beneficiary there, but also how Baker's played when pressured will be something, I think, to monitor.
So both those QBs are due to skew back in the other direction. Doesn't mean it's going to happen today, but it could.
Well, and like, when you're playing well under pressure and we know it's going to come back to earth, maybe a week against Myles freaking Garrett could be when that happens.
Yeah.
And it's not great. Like, Kyler Murray, I hope you've been staying off of social media, because if you've gone and looked at the picture of Myles Garrett front yard this week, you will find that he's already got your tombstone there, and he has taken another shot at you by making it smaller than every other tombstone.
I didn't notice that.
So bad.
Oh my gosh, it's like half the size.
Harsh but fair.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. Is that a life-size Myles Garrett skeleton there on the right?
Talk about
Is
goals,
that
too, by the way, that house.
yeah, the yard?
Do you guys think Myles
You
Garrett
see the
knows
pattern in how he mowed it too?
Yeah.
That's,
He mowed it.
Hey, listen, look, I have faith
Myles
that
Garrett
Myles
Garrett is not sitting his ass on a ride-along mower for
Come
like
on.
3.5 hours on a Saturday to get
Myles
that
Garrett's got some shoes with like grass stains on them somewhere. Like, no way.
Listen, as somebody who did a lot of mowing lawns in the summer of Florida, I hope that Myles Garrett somewhere has some New Balances with grass stains all over him, just because he's got pride in his lawn. That's what I hope. Don't take that away from me, Sam. Packers-Bears is the next game. This one's in Chicago, so I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. Of course, the big storylines, two quarterbacks, right? Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields' script's going to be certainly a little bit different, because normally Chicago has shown they really want to lean on David Montgomery. They don't have David Montgomery. We're going to get into Khalil Herbert in a second, but Sam, I want to start with you, because I want to get a little bit of an Aaron Rodgers update, because it looked like he was struggling at the beginning of the year, and then he's had some crazy fourth quarter plays, granted all to Davante Adams. But, I mean, it kind of can sometimes skew what we think. So how is Rodgers really playing this season?
Yeah, Rodgers has still made some incredible plays because he's Aaron Rodgers. And even in that first week where it was a complete disaster, there was at least one throw in there when you pulled up the film, you're like, oh, wow. Like, there are not many quarterbacks that can make this throw at all. But quietly, he's the 18th ranked quarterback in the NFL so far. Like, he is not dragging this team to the levels it was at last year. He's not playing at that kind of level at all. He's making a couple of spectacular plays here and there, and particularly when you play suicidal defense, Aaron Rodgers to Davante Adams is still capable of.
Gooey defense.
Not so much gooey, just, kamikaze, right?
Oh, okay. A new word.
Risky defense where you just roll out there going, yeah, we're playing man coverage with a guy you've never heard of, but what are you going to do about it? It turns out what they're going to do about it is go Rodgers to Davante Adams, touchdown, right?
Right.
So if you're not going to do that, I don't think Rodgers is playing at the kind of level where he's dragging this team to where it was a year ago. And, there are a lot of reasons to be twitchy and concerned about how good Justin Fields is or can be. But he has the second best big-time throw rate in the NFL this season, 8.8%, a huge number. So I think you give the Bears a bit of respect and help them on their playoff push.
Well, that's the thing. Like, the Bears have, there's the one variable that comes into play. It's how Justin Fields will play, because the defense is playing well. I think they're fundamentally good. They have good players on that defense. The offense has weapons. The offensive line's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's one big thing. But can Fields negotiate away from that and play well? I mean, we've seen people back the Packers. This opened at 4.5. It's now 6. So people are backing the Packers. You're on the road. I'll be interested to see, sort of how the Bears offense can do it, because the Packers are giving them an opening here by their offense playing sort of mediocre football
and by having no corners.
And no corners.
And that's the thing. Like, if you are a believer in Chicago's playoff hopes, maybe not win the game because this is a divisional game and you're going up against Aaron Rodgers, but like, Fields should look good in this game, right? I mean, the corners that they have outside of Jair Alexander are bad. I mean, even though it's Khalil Herbert and he's technically their RB3 going into the season, like, you can run the ball against Green Bay. So whether or not Chicago actually wins this game, I think this is a big barometer game for them, because if they struggle against Green Bay's defense, I'm gonna have serious doubts, even in a not great NFC, that they can make it.
Yeah, especially because no Zadarius Smith. The Packers defense has just lost a lot of players at different places. I mean, their best player right now in defense is Deandre Campbell, which is like
this is a game.
I guess
it's one of those ones where, look, you're putting your money in Justin Fields, who could at any moment implode, do something terrible, take a bad sack, get himself injured, all these kinds of things. So it's always going to have you on the edge of your seat. But the money has to be on Chicago covering this, because of Fields is capable of those big plays. Green Bay doesn't have the corners to cover it. They're going to be inclined to throw deep down the field. Rodgers hasn't been good enough to just make the difference by himself the way he was a year ago. I'm kind of surprised that all the money's going on Green Bay.
Let's just see this passing game. Not even look great, but just good for 4 quarters at least. We've mentioned the corner injuries, and the big stat that sticks out to me with Fields this year is that league low, 32% of his passes have been targeting a receiver we deem open or wide open. Dead last in the league. No one else is even under 40%. Yeah. So is that Fields not throwing to the right receivers? Is that his receivers not getting open? Is it Matt Nagy not being a great play caller? I tend to lean a little bit more on the latter than the 2 former ones, but either way, this is the matchup to get the passing.
It just seems so weird that sometimes Nagy always feels like he'd almost want to pass a kidney stone than call a good offense to make his quarterback look better than he is, right? It's almost like he's hazing. He's hazed Trubisky in 19. He's hazing Fields right now, and it's like, the NFC North is right there for you. If you win this home game against a banged-up Green Bay team, you are in first place. I don't get it.
That is... The NFC North has been wild to me. Obviously, the Packers have.
It's a nice way of saying bad, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the Packers have owned it at the top the last 2 years, but I mean, beyond that, I was like, okay, the Vikings could be good.
They have the best. The Vikings have the best point differential in the division. I know that a lot of that's week 1.
Also, the best quarterback this year.
Ooh.
Whoa. I refuse.
Don't clip me in that, please. I'm not a part of this. I'm not a part of this show. Ken, I know you have something for us.
Great, say.
Yeah. So the question is, and leave all questions and comments you have on YouTube and Twitter. We're going to try and get to all of them that we can. The Packers got scared in week 1 by Aaron Rodgers' performance, but since then, the MVP, he's kind of bounced back. Is anyone eager, though, for the Jordan Love era to start?
I don't know, Eric Eager. Are you eager for the Jordan Love era to start?
Jordan Love's where is Jordan Love right now if he starts? We're going to talk about the Seattle versus Pittsburgh game. Both those quarterbacks we have as about half a point better than a replacement quarterback on the spread. Mm-hmm. I think that's where I put Jordan Love too.
What about that practice he had in August where everyone was freaking out?
You give him the half a point. You're not putting him in the Davis Mills zero.
No, Davis Mills is a 0, true 0. That's what Davis Mills is.
You're giving Love that credit.
I would say Love's better than a practice squad quarterback by half a point.
Whoa.
17, getting his socks knocked off. Whoa. I was literally going to ask you, who would you rather start, Gino Smith or Jordan Love, but I think you already answered that clearly.
It depends, but yeah, it depends. That's how bad Gino Smith is. And how bad Jordan Love is, it depends.
Chargers-Ravens, the next game that we're talking about here. 2 very, very good quarterbacks, right? 2 MVP caliber quarterbacks this season. This one's in Baltimore. Baltimore is favored by 3.5. And so, Eric, I'm going to start with you on this one, actually. We've got Lamar playing incredible this year. In a year where I was told the league had figured him out. Justin Herbert is taking not just that next step, but feels like a leap into this elite quarterback category. So when you look at this game, it's in Baltimore. Baltimore's favored by 3.5. Where does your mind go for the money on this game?
Yeah, so it opens at 3.5. We saw money come in on the Chargers, even after you saw some Monday night game where we're all impressed by what happened to what Lamar did. But like you look at actually the fundamentals of that game, and that's a bad Baltimore defense. That's allowing the Carson Wentz to move the football on them with ease. So when that happened, we saw money come in on the Chargers. This thing got down to 2.5. I think Baltimore was probably a good bet there just because they have a little bit better home field than most teams. The Chargers are dealing with good variance, right? Mm-hmm. All their fourth downs are making it now, other than their kicker, who's always a disaster. Like they've gotten fairly lucky in a lot of situations.
The Chargers? Have gotten lucky?
It sounds
crazy. Wow, Brandon Staley can even fix that?
So I think right now this number's settling in at 3. I think 3 is the right number for this game, with Baltimore being favored there. The one place to look is maybe the total, where it's about 51 and a half, 50 and a half. Like, to me, I think that's probably right as well. If anything, I go under just because I want to think Baltimore's going to try to protect that defense a little bit, play to their run game a little bit. And the Chargers are a very inviting team when it comes to the run game. Really inviting.
And that's the one area where this could get interesting. The Ravens over the last few weeks have been really impressive because they've been succeeding in the area that they can't succeed in, right? Everybody knows that when the Ravens get in a hole and Lamar Jackson has to drop back and pass and be a real quarterback, all the wheels fall off and it doesn't work. Well, he's been doing that the last 3 weeks and he's looked fantastic. So that argument is kind of disappearing. On the other hand, the Chargers deliberately invite you to run. They want you to do that in this kind of smart way of playing defense. We're going to take away the big explosive plays. We're going to let you run up the middle because that's less effective generally than passing the ball. But last week they gave up 230 at 7 yards per attempt. So at that point, it ceases to become a more efficient way of playing. And the Ravens offense is at its best when that's able to tick over and dominate. When Lamar Jackson just lays waste to people on the ground, when all those running backs average 6 yards per attempt, that's where the Ravens offense is at its best. This kind of feels like the game that the Ravens have been trying to play with the Chiefs for years, and every time they tried it, it didn't work, right? Let's run the ball, let's try and grind out the clock and keep Mahomes on the sideline, and then we'll win. And every time they got in a hole early and they had to abandon the game plan.
But I think one of the things that the Chargers now have as a bug is, Keenan Allen's kind of not been the player that we've expected him so far.
He's a good number 2 on this team.
Mike Williams has been fantastic so far.
There we go.
But what has he done this week? He's Mike Williams the hell out of this week by missing all practice. And obviously Jared Cook is Jared Cook. The Ravens, for all their foibles on defense, have one player who can cover the other team's best player pretty well, and that's Marlon Humphrey, right? And so to me, I think that maybe there's a little bit of a better chance for the Ravens to have success in this game. A, because they're not sleeping on the other team's offense like they were with the Colts and Michael Pittman and Carson Wentz, but also because it's not like the Chargers have weapon after weapon after weapon on the outside that's healthy and productive like they had been in previous weeks.
I guess the one thing with the Chargers defense, and I'm terrified to criticize Brandon Staley because you never know when he'll just get up there for his next press conference and just give the most well-put answer ever and somehow get all of Twitter to agree with him. But that strategy, Sam, of just really sticking with the secondary, trying to defend the pass first, I think we'd all agree that's a great strategy against 29 or 30 teams in the league.
Right.
Not against the Browns, though, and not against the Ravens. So when we just saw them really not even care that the Browns could run the ball up and down the field, it's incredibly problematic in this one.
I think this is a massive, I've talked about barometer games before, but, to the Chargers wanting other teams to run the football, the two teams in the NFL, like you just mentioned, that you wouldn't want to do that against, Browns, just beat them last week, Ravens this week. Now, they gave them 42 points against the Browns. So you're playing with fire a little bit here, but if they have this strategy, run the ball whenever you want. You go up against two of the best rushing teams in the league, and they come out with W's, especially with Mike Williams banged up. We're talking about a legit AFC contender.
Yeah,
no
I think
doubt
the
about it.
naysayers
If they
would
come
say
away
that
with a win.
if any one of those fourth downs that they try in their own territory go belly up and they lose the game, they're down multiple scores. I think the Chargers have a very coherent worldview. And they can win the games when everything hits, and I think that's very good, right? When you play Kansas City and you play this sort of woke style of football and everything hits, you can beat Kansas City and Arrowhead, and to me there are teams that when they play everything correctly, they're still not playing a good enough game tactically to win against the great teams. The Chargers are there. That doesn't mean that they can give up 7 yards to carry every game and win, if that makes sense, because they're going to miss a fourth down here and there, or Herbert's going to have an issue throwing the football at times, and if that happens, they can't. But it is interesting. If they come out with a W here, it's going to be really hard to argue the way they approach football.
Right. Kendall, I know you got something for us.
Yeah, we got some inactive news, actually. So Ravens running back Tyson Williams, he is inactive today. So the question really becomes, will a Ravens running back finally take over the backfield?
I'm going straight to Ian because he immediately had a facial and hand gesturing reaction to that one.
Well, because every running back they put with Lamar Jackson averages like 6 yards per carry, except Latavius Murray, who I think is at 3.3, 3.4. Pick your advanced broken tackle metric. I can guarantee you he's in the bottom 5. Tyson Williams has been the best running back statistically, and Latavius is the one taking over. So again, I'm not Harbaugh. I'm sure there's good reasons why this is the case, but it's incredibly frustrating. You can start Latavius, and you probably won't feel good about it. I don't. On the other side of the ball, we can feel good about the running back, and that is Austin Eckler. What's interesting about this Chargers team, we were talking about them, really running right and having things go their way. That's been especially true for Austin Eckler. We were able to get kind of overachievers and just who might not be doing that in the other way with some of our expected points versus realized. And you can look at the chart right now. Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler, Cordero Patterson. We're talking studs among studs at this top 3 people. With that said, they have found the end zone a little bit more often than we would expect running their volume through 100 simulations or so. So Austin Eckler is still a top 5 fantasy back, and he's getting the goal line carries this year. But yes, it would make sense if this Chargers offense just comes back to earth a little bit.
We're going to get to everybody's favorite 5 minutes of the show, and that is Eric talking about Ben Roethlisberger in a second. But before we get to that, got to talk to the people about our friends over at Pristine Auction. This is your go-to place for autographed sports memorabilia. It's all auction style, so you got bids starting at $1. Gives you a chance to get some big-time steals. No matter what player you're looking for, team, they got you covered. You're going to be able to find it, and you're going to be able to get it at a great price as well. If you use the promo code PFF, you'll get $10 off whatever the first auction is that you win. Not just the first one that you bet on. It's going to be the first one that you win. So use that promo code PFF, pristineauction.com, your go-to place for autographed sports memorabilia. Seattle Seahawks, Pittsburgh Steelers. This one's in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's favored by 4.
Pittsburgh beautiful this time of year.
Is that the best thing you're going to say about this game for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Start off saying something nice.
Yeah, no, it's
net zero.
Net zero, and I've learned that that's. Oh, the line moved to 5.
Lines, 5.
I think we've got an update that the line moved to 5. Okay, so what do you think about that? Pittsburgh is at -5 as the home team. Gino Smith's in there for Seattle. What do you think?
We make Gino Smith about a 6.5 or 7 point downgrade per game over Russell Wilson. So if you think about this, if Russell's playing this game after a 10 days rest, they're probably 2.5 point favorites on the road against Pittsburgh, which I think you'd have to be a complete sicko to bet, right? Because Seattle never plays these normal games. They'll get upset by a team like this. But now at +5, you look and say, okay, what are these teams going to do? They're going to try to play this game close. The Seattle Seahawks love playing these games close. They love running the football. They love staying on script or whatever the hell that means. And I think if that's the case, you're looking at 2 quarterbacks who I have power rated the exact same. Gino Smith and Ben Roethlisberger about a 0.5 point better than a practice squad quarterback at this point. So take the points with Seattle. To me, that seems like just an absolute, send here, despite all the issues that Seattle has defensively, because I just don't know if Big Ben can take advantage of them.
Is this your best bet for the week?
I don't think it's my best bet of the week, but I certainly have taken it. Yeah.
This is like a neighbor's car.
Yeah.
This is a neighbor's car. It's not my own car.
Okay.
Not my own car.
Yeah, okay. Somebody else's car, middle of the road car. A couple of years old, got some miles on the clock. To me, it comes down to how much pressure the Pittsburgh defense is going to get on Gino Smith, because they might be functionally similar quarterbacks at this point, but I think the way it manifests itself is quite different. Intuitively, I would have thought that Gino Smith, given the style of quarterback he is, struggles really badly against the blitz for his career. Turns out he doesn't. He's about the same guy when he's blitzed and when he isn't. Where he really struggles is when he's put under any kind of pressure. If you get pressure on Gino Smith, he has a career PFF grade of 30, which is just catastrophically bad. That's where you were talking about Baker Mayfield. That's worse than that, but for his entire career. So The Steelers haven't been this crazy blitz team that we anticipate them being over the last couple of years. They haven't been Blitzburg this year. They've been getting their pressure a lot through just the front four, and they haven't been getting anywhere near as much as they got over the last couple of years. But if they can get pressure against Gino Smith just using the front four, Gino Smith will be bad,
do you think
and Roethlisberger will be better.
So you say it manifests itself, and we'll have the graphic there where you have Big Ben, you have Gino Smith, and then you have Davis Mills. It manifests itself.
What a graphic. What a graphic.
It manifests itself differently, but I think it's also like the issue with Big Ben in general, which is that he sets himself up to limit the offense before he even throws the football, right? Where it's quick. He doesn't put pressure on himself, but the ceiling for that offense is pretty low. With Gino Smith, I still think the average is the same, but the high-end parts are good, right? Yeah. And in this game, if you take a deep shot to Locke, you take a deep shot to Metcalf, you have some tight ends that have done okay things this year, not great things. Then that could be the 14 points you need to win this game. Whereas Big Ben is going to try to paper cut a Seahawks defense that you could just rip. But he won't be able to do it because of the way that he limits things. I think he would be similarly bad under pressure, but he's too scared to put himself in those positions, and therefore you don't get the big plays out of that Pittsburgh offense.
You just don't even need pressure for Roethlisberger to make the bad plays.
Exactly.
The thing is, Roethlisberger is going to be basically in the middle somewhere, and a below-average quarterback making a few mistakes, not taking too many shots deep down the field, unless for some reason he opens up the way he did last week, where there were a few bombs in there. Gino is probably going to be at that level, but there's also the chance that if you get him under a ton of pressure, which that defense is still capable of doing, he goes all the way off the cliff, and you just get horrendous Gino.
I can just imagine the graphics team hearing that, all right, we need a Davis Mills, Gino Smith, Ben Roethlisberger.
These are our guys.
Yeah, this is what we're doing. And the graphics team's like, why do I work here?
Wouldn't it be funny, though, because Russ has overcome, it'd be funny in a really sad way, but
very, very
Russ
sad.
over these years has had to overcome so much in this offense. If you just want to have someone make the most out of 23 pass attempts, Russell Wilson is your guy. They bring in Shane Waldron. We're going to use more shift and motion this year. They're bottom 5 in both things so far. What if, now that Gino's under center, they say, hey, we got Metcalf, we got Lockett, let's start throwing the ball in early downs. Let's start, feeding our best players the actual rock more often.
Just out of spite.
Chris Carson is out. I know it doesn't really matter, maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but perhaps the Seahawks are smart for once on offense.
Not holding my breath. But
this feels like it has to be the get-right game for Roethlisberger, if there is a get-right game, right? Because when you look at...
Did you combine his names? Was it Roethlisberger?
Did I say that? Did I say Roethlisberger?
Yeah. I feel like at a crisp Pittsburgh night, you do have some soup, some Roethlisberger maybe would soothe the badness of what this game's going to be.
So it's just soup, but with French fries.
I think brought this up in week 2. At this point in his career, Big Ben doesn't even do the things that you would expect a veteran to do well. He's more turnover prone. They're actually really low in pressure only because he's so terrified to get rid of the ball. If it's a fourth, I'd love to see his time to release on fourth downs because it is less than the same.
Listen, all I'm saying is explosive play, explosive pass rate allowed, yards per attempt allowed, QB rating allowed, points per reception allowed. Seattle is bottom beyond 25th. They're 25th to dead last in the NFL in all 4 of those categories. All of them. So, if there is hope for Roethlisberger to evolve back into Ben Roethlisberger, this is it.
I think this is a defense doesn't matter sort of check, which is the people who say defense doesn't matter is look, you could literally put a high school team out there and the guy can't hit the broadside of a barn. And the Seattle Seahawks weirdly represent that on defense. If it does move the needle more than we think, Roethlisberger might go out there and actually make some plays.
This is
make a little stew out there.
This is a bad
The
bit.
one potential hope for Pittsburgh is similar to Seattle. They have 2 great outside receivers still, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster will be missing the rest of the season, but all those stats that Trev just mentioned, hey, this could be a liftoff spot for both Deontay and Claypool. Getting that volume finally condensed over 2 guys. Can Ben get the ball there is a very good, very reasonable question. But hey, I do think this offense is better off going through them versus these, 19 checkdowns to Najee a few weeks ago.
And we saw that last week, right? They randomly started passing against one of the best pass defenses in the NFL, corners across the board, and they opened up and started going deep to these guys. That is the only way that Roethlisberger and this Steelers offense is going to be any good, is if they just go, look, screw it. We've got a quarterback that will make some mistakes. It's better he makes mistakes taking a shot 40 yards downfield than it is throwing the ball to a linebacker between me and you in terms of distance.
Yes.
Like, let's just open it up and see what happens. It might be bad, it might be good, but it's not going to be worse.
Kendall, do we have a
We do.
Roethlisberger
We
and
do.
or soup question, or is
We
it something
do.
else for us?
We do have a Roethlisberger question. This question comes in through YouTube. It's asked, it's hard to call a Week 6 game a must-win game. Obviously, you guys know that. But is this really a game the Steelers need to win to keep playoff aspirations alive?
Yes.
I mean, they have to look good, right?
Yeah,
Back to what we just said.
They're I can't remember the exact number, but there's something like 500-1 to win the division or something really crazy like that. And
500-1.
I think it may be 50-1, something crazy, like prohibitively so. And when you look at the AFC isn't like the NFC, right? Like, if you mess around and try to go 9-8, you're not making the playoffs, right? And you know, the thing that about the Steelers that's kind of bad at this point, how many times do they play the Browns?
Twice.
None.
Oh,
yeah.
still.
They
Okay.
still have two more.
Yeah.
They still have to play the Ravens twice. And they already lost to the Bengals at home.
And they got whooped.
They got whooped by the Bengals. So this is a must-win game. It also is one of those where if they do win, a win against an NFC opponent nets you almost nothing other than one win in the standings. And so this is a game that, like, they can only really lose this game. That's like the hard part.
Can anybody do a good Jim Morris Sr. impression? Like, what are we talking about? Of course they're not making the playoffs. They haven't got a shot.
And nor does America want to see them in the playoffs. 'Cause the last
You
time
don't
we saw
speak for America.
The last time we saw Big Ben in the playoffs, it was one of the worst games that, like, it was he every single quarterback that's ever thrown for 500 yards just had their, like, accomplishment just pissed on in that game, because Big Ben desecrated the memory of every 500-yard game in that game against the Browns. We do not want, like, America doesn't want to see this, do we?
This is somehow transformed into a town hall debate for a presidential election.
Yeah.
America does not want this.
so
You're
I
telling the
speak
people
confidently for America.
what they want.
I saw a Fox graphic that was advertising America's Game of the Week. We had Dak, we had Josh Allen on Monday night. There's Big Ben slid in between them. Our graphic has Davis Mills, Gino, and Big Ben. So that's the difference between PFF and America.
The truth.
Buffalo Bills at Tennessee Titans is the next game that we're talking about here. Titans at home getting 4.5. So this is a Titans team that, as we spoke at the beginning of the show, they're plucky. They need to win the division. Somebody's got to win it. But on the other side of things, Buffalo looks like an unstoppable train right now. And I think that Sam, you mentioned how well Josh Allen was playing even more recently. But what about that defense? What about Buffalo's defense? What's the story there?
I mean, their defense is statistically the number one defense in the NFL in a variety of categories. And before last week, you say, yeah, but, look at the quarterbacks they've played. Like, they haven't played anybody. It's being artificially inflated. It looks better than it is. And then they basically do the same thing to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right, albeit, some weather involved and all those kinds of things. But their defense does look absolutely for real. They're number one in explosive pass rate allowed. They're number 5 in explosive run rate allowed. They have been so good at just stopping the big plays, and they're better than they were the last couple of years at stopping the lesser plays, the ones that would kill them by 1,000 paper cuts over the course of the season. It becomes interesting this week because you're facing Tennessee, who are getting their studs back, right? And all of a sudden you now do need to figure out how to stop Julio and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, and Tannehill can still get the ball there. So it's a fun matchup, but I'm buying into this Buffalo defense now.
Yeah, I think the really impressive thing about Buffalo is they're doing that on defense without really much. I think Matt Milano is a top 10 player at his position in the front seven, but really it's a bunch of young players, a bunch of players who aren't making that much money, and a secondary that's well paid. But really, like, Teron Johnson's just kind of a guy, but he's finally got a contract extension. That's awesome. Their second cornerback spot they kind of patch around every single year. They're doing it not necessarily. They don't have to buy a ton of defensive players to have great defense, and I think that's a really good thing to have, because then on offense, the other side of the ball, you can go out and get a Diggs, you can go out and get a Sanders, you can patch up the O-line when you need to. And when you look at that, and you can pay Josh Allen $43 million a year and not have it be prohibitive like it is in many other places like LA and Minnesota and San Francisco and so forth. So, like, it is a really well-constructed team. they answered the biggest question they're going to of the season last week. And the graphic put that up there. They have the 29th hardest schedule after this. So that's probably the last real big question they're going to answer all year. The one that I think that we look at in this game is, can they stop a running game that is as lethal as any? Because until the wheels fall off of Henry, I think he does matter a lot. And in some ways, it matters differently against them than the Chiefs offense did, because the Chiefs offense couldn't get anything going on those early downs and had to lean on Patrick Mahomes, and they neutralized him. If Tennessee doesn't have to lean on their pass game on 3rd and long in this game, they can cover this number.
Ian, what do we think about the Titans getting some of their studs back?
AJB. Prime buy low in all of fantasy at this point. It's not that different from what happened last year. He wasn't doing much to start last season. He got hurt. He returned in week 5 in a primetime game against the Bills, had a big night and had a big rest of the season. This year, scores a touchdown week 1, couple drops week 2. He's been hurt. They didn't need him in a Jaguars game where Henry went nuts. Now he's back to a primetime game against the Buffalo Bills, ready to explode again. So it's just, again, I think the Titans are a bit of a fraudulent contender, but we saw it last year. They do match up better against the Bills than I think a lot give them credit for. And give Tannehill some respect. Still our 6th highest graded passer without Julio and AJB for most of the years. I am a gambling man, I would be a little afraid to take the Titans here with the number. But Eric, just in terms of what the Titans do well compared to what Buffalo maybe doesn't on defense, they can maybe put up some points.
Well, the high variance that is Allen, I think we do have to be careful about looking and saying, oh, they didn't play anybody. Then they whomped the Chiefs. So our look at their first 4 games, it's still just one game.
Right.
Then
your brain wants to make it all the same, but it isn't.
It doesn't cover all this. And they're not sins. You beat the teams on your schedule, but that game doesn't mean necessarily as much. It doesn't make the 4 previous games all matter more. It's one game. And Allen had, going into last week, was one of the more frequent turnover-worthy play guys in the NFL. Their wide receivers had not played as well as they had a season ago, et cetera, et cetera. If you put that variance in, you take a home team that's now getting 5.5 because people have started to bet on the Bills, understandably so. I do think it's going to be really hard to lay the points of Buffalo in this game.
Can we just go back for a second to the most important thing that's been said on the show in the last 6 weeks?
I said that Derrick Henry mattered?
Eric Eager, data scientist, analytics guy, said that Derrick Henry, a running back, mattered.
Not just mattered. A lot. He said a lot.
Football is a matchups game.
It's a week-to-week league.
So look, and people are going to get mad because
don't try and justify it. It's just it happened. It was a beautiful moment, and we should celebrate it. We don't need to explain yourself.
I said, and I caveated it all. Once the wheels fall off, blah blah blah. But in this moment, he
hates it already.
He is a moose, and
I see the anger in those eyes.
No, it's fine. I think in this particular matchup, you can. I think that this Tennessee team provides some value, despite how bad they are. The division is so bad, and they can lose this game by 40 and still be the favorite in that division. I think in this one matchup, they will have a chance.
I kind of want to push back on you a little bit when you said that the way the Bills played against the Chiefs and really handled them doesn't mean that necessarily the easier games that happened before that, it's not like they mean more. I don't know about that, because I feel like you just said, you can only play the teams on your schedule, and those easy couple of games, they kick the crap out of these teams. And maybe the ball bounces a little bit of ways and makes it a little bit lucky. Maybe they don't get 2 shutouts within those first 4 games. But to me, it feels like Buffalo took care of business against the teams they should beat, and then beat the ones that you were kind of.
But I think the issue was how many completions did Allen have against the Chiefs? It was 15 or so, and he had a ton of passing yards because Daniel Sorensen was just giving them to him. But it wasn't like he went out against the Chiefs and went 35 of 40 for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. He filleted them on a few plays. But it was still a low sample size, big play situation. And the reason that we were kind of low on Buffalo was because Allen had not played well, even in beating those teams by 35 points. To me, that's where I relent a little bit and say, because if Allen plays as well as he did last year, they're going to boat race Tennessee. But I don't know if that's necessarily a lock just after last week, where he had a low volume game and looked great against Kansas City.
And we've seen the other side of that coin, right? Denver was 3-0. They had been destroying teams the first 3 weeks, and we were saying, but your season starts now because those were three teams you were supposed to win, and you don't get extra style points just for how much you beat them. And Denver, since then, are they're 3-2. So we've seen that those first 3 games for Denver didn't mean anything, but because the Bills won their first test, their first real test, we're like, oh, well, it's all the same now.
Same thing with the Panthers, right? Panthers started 3-0 against an easy schedule, then go 0-2. If the Panthers would have squeaked out that game against Philly last week, that doesn't change any of the fundamentals about them. It was still sort of like, as you said, week-to-week league. I think
it doesn't mean nothing.
It doesn't mean nothing, but
your mind automatically wants to assign more value to it because we saw them back it up against the Chiefs. Whereas realistically, it means the same as it meant for like Denver, which is, okay, you beat the teams you were supposed to beat, but now your season actually starts.
Yeah. I still think, and our power rankings say this, we do have Buffalo as best team in the NFL, the most likely team to make the playoffs, the most likely team to get a 1 seed in either conference, and the favorite to win the Super Bowl.
Only one man could stop them. Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, Roethlisberger's the only guy.
Kendall, what do you got for us before we get out of here?
Trevor, this question's for you. I've got one more question from YouTube, and you have to explain it because I picked you up from the airport this morning.
Okay.
Should I start or sit my Kia Sorrento?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, this was not a great situation for me traveling to get to this show. Rented a car for the wedding I was at this weekend, and go to pick up the keys for the rental car to leave, and they're nowhere to be found. So I instead had to take an Uber to leave my rental car where it was. They're nowhere to be found. If you see any Kia Rio keys anywhere in the Cape May, New Jersey area, please DM me on Twitter. I am looking for them. I would like to bring them up. So thank you for that. Thank you for making me explain my stupidity and what was this morning to get to the show.
You came back from New Jersey in an Uber?
Not all the way, not like the 9 hours to get to Cincinnati, but Cape May to the Philadelphia airport, it's about an hour and a half of an Uber, which...
I bet you were sitting there for a while there, and this is similar to the Bills. You're saying, look, I'm in Jersey.
This is good.
Already down bad a little bit, Jersey. But the wedding sounds like amazing. So you were so Jersey was hitting, swinging above its weight class.
Sure, this is good.
And then, of course, regression hits like a ton of bricks in the form of your
I go back to my own life
Jersey
reality.
becomes Jersey.
Yeah.
It always does. Water finds its level.
Atlantic City effects without even me going to Atlantic City.
Exactly.
So, all right. We got any final thoughts before we get out? Wait, Kendall, do you have another one?
No.
Okay.
No,
all right. Okay. I wasn't sure if you had one more. I didn't want to cut you off if you had another non-embarrassing Kia Rio question. You guys got any final thoughts before we get out of here and get to these games this week?
I don't think there's anything I could possibly add to the Kia Rio story.
You could add my keys.
I don't have them. Sorry.
Okay, I just figured I'd ask.
You might as well ask everybody, but I don't
should not have played Shout for the second time, it sounds like, at the wedding.
I think we only played it once.
Okay.
I think, you know what? Actually, you're right. I think they did play it twice. It was just all downhill after that. Ian, anything?
J.D. McKissick, 100-plus yards and a touchdown. Nobody will like it, but you cannot deny J.D. McKissick.
There we go. That's some actual final thoughts. We love to see it. Everybody, thanks so much for watching. Like I said, if you're in Cape May and you find some Kia Rio keys, hit me up. Enjoy the games this week. We'll see you guys right here this time next week.